Hello everybody and welcome to the third top 10 in F1, and here we go with the top 10 underdog performances. If you have absolutely no idea what an underdog is, well, you'll probably have a good guesstimation by the end of this. Of course, an underdog is somebody who punches above their own weight, probably above the performance of that car mostly, and probably qualifying position to achieve a good quality result, or look towards achieving a good quality result until something happens. As is not actually the case with Kimi Rikknen, of course. In Japan 2005, you'll see here with Giancarlo Fisichella. Of course, the McLaren was deemed to be one of the best cars on the grid, if not the best car. Of course, it was actually quite unreliable, which is why it lost the championship. But Kimi Rikknen himself started from a very lowly grid position on the 20-car grid, of course filled with Minardis and Jordans and Ferraris who were having a terrible season. And of course, the McLaren was one of the fastest cars, but Kimi Rikknen came through from the back of the, well, pretty much the back of the pack until the front. He kind of benefited from an incident with Montoya, which brought out the safety car though, so that you could say he didn't really benefit by gaining the position on Juan Pablo Montoya. So he gained the win. But sadly, I think this was where Fernando Alonso won the championship on points, or it was the first race after he won the championship on points. But hey, Raikkonen did win this race, and it was a very fantastic race. I remember watching it actually, it was fantastic. Loved it so much, although I probably was about 7. Right, so here we go on to number 9. We have actually the second McLaren of this countdown. We have John Watson at Long Beach in 1982. In fact, you wouldn't expect a McLaren to be this far down this often, but there are actually far different reasons for it, because of course the McLaren in 1982 wasn't actually as good at qualifying, and the tyres in qualifying, I'm pretty sure they used qualifying tyres back in those days, made the matters even worse. So they qualified far down the grid, but as it's a street circuit, you wouldn't really expect somebody to claw their way back, probably like Suzuka, as Kimi Rikknen did, but of course John Watson did that around Long Beach. Of course, this is a different version of Long Beach used in the IndyCar Championship and what is used in the Formula E, of course. It's a very different layout, although it does still use the same front straight, although this is the first corner, and of course you'll see it's right. But here we go, if you see in the top left corner, you'll actually see the McLarens at the back. Of course, one of them is John Watson, and you would see that one clawing its way back through the field. It's a very fantastic race. I think I saw it on a highlights classic races thing on Sky, partially because it was a fantastic race and I actually enjoyed watching it. Though despite as it was 1987, there were a few retirements, so that probably may have helped him as a bit more. But of course, this is 1982, not 2014, so it is actually possible to overtake. Right, we're here at number 8 already, and here we are with Johnny Herbert in Nürburgring 1999. You could actually say that Luca Badoer himself also could be a part of this list at number 8 probably, though it'd probably be lower considering he wasn't actually very successful and didn't really get in the points, partially because of his car breaking down. In fact, there's a very well-known image of him crying beside his car. Of course, Johnny Herbert didn't actually qualify that well, qualified outside the top 10 like John Watson did and Kimi Rikknen did before him, but he did have a good enough car to go, and probably a driver as well, but we'll leave that, to continue through the rain, the changeable conditions and the crash at the start to secure a famous win for Jackie Stewart's team, who inevitably got on to finish 4th in the Constructors, of course. And this is another race that I didn't actually personally watch, unless I probably watched it when I was about 2, but hey, it was probably a very fantastic race and I'll probably enjoy it. So at number 7 we have Jean Alesi's drive in the 1990 Phoenix Grand Prix at the very start of the 90s, of course. He actually ended the 90s with some very good results in Formula 1, but of course he was actually there for pretty much half a season whilst winning the International Formula 3000 over Eric Comas. Of course that actually was fought very closely and ended as a tie, although Jean Alesi won that title because he had won 3 races over Comas's 2. But hey, feeder series over, we have the actual main series, and of course Ayrton Senna on the left, Jean Alesi on the right, and This, I think, is the image of Ayrton Senna passing Jean Alesi. Please feel free to complain about that in the comments below, although this was Phoenix, and Phoenix actually threw up some very interesting results in the 1990 race. To be honest, of the podium finishers, Jean Alesi was the highest qualified. He did qualify 4th ahead of Senna in 5th, but Thierry Boutsen, of course, qualified 9th, of course, the Belgian. So 3 different nationalities representing 3 different cars, driven by 3 different phases of driver, you could say. Of course, 3 different phases of driver in their career, with the young Jean Alesi, the near-experienced Ayrton Senna, well, the relatively experienced Ayrton Senna, of course, as he made his debut in the 1984 season. Of course, Jean Alesi done some races, not that many compared to Thierry Boutsen, but Thierry Boutsen was, of course, in the Williams, which made him quite competitive against the... Well, actually, Williams were entering slightly of a rejuvenation between the late 80s and the early 90s. So at number 6 we have the Leighton House team at the Circuit Paul Ricard, of course, as you'll be able to see there. Very much different to the Paul Ricard of today, but of course it did host a Formula 1 race many years ago. In fact, it hosted a few Formula 1 races many years ago. Although in the 1990 season, this is the 1990 season of course, we have the 2 Leighton Houses who actually led 1 and 2. Of course they qualified quite highly up on the grid as well for a team that normally isn't able to qualify, of course requiring the use of pre-qualifying, which was probably a fantastic use during the day. Pretty much weeded out who wasn't actually serious about competing and wanted to because they were able to, which is probably what the 107% rule did and was able to do in the 1997 season for Lola, who actually folded pretty much a week later. But hey, the Leighton House has actually led 1 and 2, and apparently this was due to erroneous data in the wind tunnel, which had led to their lack of success in the recent races. Leading up to this, apparently neither Leighton House car qualified for the race in Mexico, and another one, I can't remember which one, and that really proved to be a disappointment. Of course, Mexico was the early races, but here we go. The change in the wind tunnel data meant that they were able to launch to the front pretty much. Of course, you could say this is an inventive design by their relatively unknown designer, Adrian Newey, well, technical director at the time. Of course, the 2 drivers, Marco Gugelmin and Ivan Capelli, were 2 who were unable to really eke out the performance of the car, so unlike a Senna or a Prost would, but of course they got the job done, so it probably shows that in fact that car could have won that race. Well, with Capelli, because Gugelmin actually retired and Capelli was caught by Prost in the late stages. So, number 5 already, we have Olivier Panis in Monaco 1996. Of course, his win was actually helped by a multitude of retirements, which included Michael Schumacher on the first lap actually at the corner after Lowe's hairpin, and before Portier of course. And well, it was actually quite a good drive by Panis himself, but really he was helped by, well, you could say the conditions and the retirements that followed, of course, but all credit to him. He did win at Ligier, cannot take that away from him, of course, which I think became Prost actually a few years later. Don't quote me on that, but it may be true, you never know. Of course, France, well, Panis hadn't actually won in a long time, and you could say he was also a part of another underdog attempt, really, because of his exploits in Spain 1997. Could probably associate Giancarlo Fisichella himself with the word underdog, especially in his exploits in the 2005 Japanese Grand Prix and his role in assisting Raikkonen to win, basically by not letting him stay behind, of course. But Giancarlo Fisichella actually came second in this race, probably like most of our other underdogs, including the Leighton House, Jean Alesi in the Phoenix race. To be honest, you could say these underdog results weren't really successful, but considering the aerodynamic changes of where Force India were at the time, to be honest, you could actually disprove that, really. Giancarlo's performance at here and Monza were exceptional, to be honest. If you include the start and the qualifying, Giancarlo Fisichella actually got the front 2 rows in both of those races. In fact, no, Giancarlo Fisichella was drafted out to replace the injured Felipe Massa for the Monza race. Replacement Vitantonio Liuzzi actually got the front 2 rows in that race, so you couldn't really take advantage of the superior straight line speed of the Force India, of course helped by the Mercedes engine. Who would have thought that? So at number 3 we have Damon Hill in the Arrows, of course, which you would actually associate with underdog status. The actual combination itself, not the driver himself, of course, but of course Damon Hill in the Arrows was actually on the Bridgestone tyres, so during the tyre war they were actually better suited to the track, which meant that he was able to get far better grip, which meant that he was able to pass people so easily like he did down into turn 1, probably by the improved straight line speed achieved by the extra speed gained off the corner. So you could probably say that he was actually pretty fast down the straight, despite not having the world's best engine in the Yamaha. Of course, he actually sustained this fight until pretty much the final 2 laps of the 77 lap race, in which his car decided to start failing, so he basically dropped like a stone, which allowed Jacques Villeneuve to catch up and pass him easily, and that's basically what happened. Of course, Damon Hill, of course, is known as one of the best drivers on the grid that season. How he wasn't in a better car, I don't know, but he did get to Jordan after his 1-year contract ended, which was actually created with the intention of improving his team for the next season. So, you're probably wondering why I've included both Ayrton Senna and Stefan Beloff in the Monaco 1984 Underdog session, really. Well, you could say that because both Ayrton Senna and Stefan Beloff were actually pretty much very quick, to be honest. It was rumoured that Stefan Beloff would have won the race should the race have gone to full completion, as he was actually catching Senna and Senna himself was catching Prost. Of course, Prost stopped the race before that could happen though. So yes, you could say this was controversial because Prost stopped the race and the rain pretty much didn't get much heavier, and of course both Ayrton Senna and Stefan Beloff didn't complain about the conditions from what we know, although Ayrton Senna and Stefan Beloff were in very, well, relatively poor teams compared to Prost McLaren, of course, which Ayrton Senna joined for the 1988 season, as Ayrton Senna went very quickly, of course, which meant that he was able to catch Prost and fly through the field, despite a low starting position, of course, which was fantastic to say the least. You can argue all day about what the top 10 underdog performances are, but to be honest, I class Giancarlo Fisichella's Brazilian Grand Prix of 2003 as the underdog performance, to be honest. Of course, the others were very successful relative to what they normally have, partially because they are underdogs, or they were very successful compared to what they would have had, but to be honest, this was an actual success, and they weren't really successes, to be honest. The others were very unusual and fantastic to watch, but they weren't really a success. But what to me would class as a very fantastic underdog performance would be what Giancarlo Fisichella did, to be honest. The Jordan team got no points in the first 2 races of the season, which meant they were on no points, despite the change of the point system. Of course, going from 10 to nothing till 6th, it's 10 to nothing until, well, 9th really, because 9th is the first person to get no points. Of course, Giancarlo Fisichella got 9th or lower in the first few races, as did Ralph Furman. Who that is, you'll be asking. To be honest, I don't really know. I haven't seen him much. But hey, Giancarlo Fisichella drove a fantastic race, of course aided by a few retirements, especially from the turn 3, which caught many people out, including Justin Wilson, Michael Schumacher, and Barrichello's fuel system failed, which meant that he had an endless run of luck. Well, luck in bad luck. If he had no luck at all, it'd be, well, no luck at all.